What's up guys, hope you're all doing great. Welcome back to another Premiere Pro tutorial. In the previous video we went through the Lumetri scopes, and in this video we're going to look at the Lumetri Colour Panel and the controls we have available in here. So first of all, if you can't see the Lumetri Colour Panel, that's probably because you're not in the right workspace. So all you need to do is you need to click in here in your Windows tab and then select Lumetri Colour, and hopefully now you should be able to see it over here. So under the Lumetri panel, we have 6 tabs and we are going to go through each of these tabs. But in this video, we will be covering basic correction and creative. So let's first see what the basic correction tab offers. So the first thing in the basic correction tab is the LUT drop down, and a LUT is a lookup table, and what it does is that it gives a certain look to your footage. Now we will discuss this in more detail later on, like how to apply LUTs and where you can find LUTs. But for now, just think of a LUT as a pre-configured or a pre-designed look that you can apply on your clips. Now the next one we have here is the white balance, and this is basically going to see if the whites in the image are going towards a specific color channel. So if I select a white in my clip right now, and then you will see that it will adjust the blues and greens automatically. So let me now just turn off my Lumetri effect for a second so I can show you guys the before and after. So I can do this just by clicking here on this FX icon. If I click on it, I have turned my effect off. And if I click on it again, so it's back on now. So you can see the before and after effect. Now then the temperature sliders we have here are basically the sliders with complementary colors. So we have blue on one end and orange on the other, and then the next one we have is green and magenta on opposite ends. So if I move the slider towards blue, then that will give the image a cold look, and if I move it towards orange, it will give my image, my clip, a warmer look. Now these sliders are mostly used for color balance, as you can see in the Rgb Parade as well, that when I'm taking my slider towards left, towards blue, it is changing my color channel. So when you are trying to color balance your footage, if you don't want to use the curves, you can come over here in this section and use these 2 sliders as well. Now the next set of sliders we have under the tone section are all to do with the luminous levels of your clip. As you can see that we have the exposure, we have contrast, highlights, shadows, whites and blacks. So I'm going to bring up my Luma Waveform because these sliders will have an effect on the luminous levels of my clip. So now I've got my Luma Waveform over here, so that's fine. So on the Luma Waveform monitor, the blacks are here from 0 to 20 IRE. Then we have the shadows that are in the region of 20 to 40 IRE. Then the brightness are in the range of 40 to 60 IRE. Then we've got the highlights that lie in about 60 to 80 IRE, and then the whites that are in the region of 80 to 100 IRE. So as you can see now that I'm moving these sliders, the effect can be clearly seen in the relative regions. If I increase the blacks, you can see the effect in the 0 to 20 range of my waveform monitor. Similarly, if I move the highlights, then you can notice that in the 60 to 80 IRE range. A general rule is not to have anything above 100, as the details will be lost in the whites, and also not to have anything below or around 0, as the details will be lost in the blacks. An ideal waveform should be spread very evenly, but again it depends on the mood of your clip too. So if you have a clip of a dark room, then obviously most of your stuff would be here in the bottom section and you wouldn't have too much going on in the top half. Let me quickly show you the way I adjust my clip. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the whites down, and then the blacks as well, and also the shadows. And now I am going to increase my contrast a bit, and let's increase the highlights as well. So straight away you can see the effect not just in my clip but on the waveform monitor too. I think this looks fine. So let's just give it a warmer look. So I'm going to go towards a little orange and then a slight adjustment to the tint as well. Okay, cool. So now we can see that our waveform monitor looks perfect. So let's go to the Rgb Parade and see if our colors are balanced or not. So let me bring up the Rgb Parade and get rid of my waveform monitor so I've got enough space. Okay, cool. So now I can see that, we can see that the red channel is slightly higher than the other two. So I'm gonna bring it down a bit and then bring this one down too. So you can now see that the colors are now balanced. Yeah, so that's fine. So let me just now turn my Lumetri effect off by clicking here on this FX button. And so this is our clip before, and if I turn it on again, so this is after. So this one looks much better. So now guys, one thing to remember is that these scopes are there for guidance, and when you are color correcting or color grading your clips, you will obviously need to look at the scopes as well as your clip too. So you'll be using these scopes and your eyes both. You can't just rely completely on your eyes, because your monitor, your screen might not be showing you the full colors, or you may have become used to the colors on the screen. So it's always better to have these scopes and your clips side by side, and also some common sense too. Now you also have the option of resetting all the changes that you have made by hitting this reset button. And let's say that you don't have time to do all of this stuff, and you also don't have a LUT to apply on your clip, then you can simply ask Premiere to color correct your footage automatically by clicking on this auto button. And as you can see that as soon as I clicked on this auto button, Premiere just kind of adjusted my contrast highlights and some bits over there. And now this is before and this is after. So it made very few adjustments over there. Now the last one we have under this tab is the saturation, and it deals with the overall color, with the overall hue of your clip. Let me bring up first of all my vector scope, because we went through it in the last video and we know from there that the vector scope deals with our saturation. So I'm gonna get rid of my Rgb Parade now, and I've got my vector scope here. So now you can see that when I'm moving the saturation slider up, the colors are not changing, but they're just intensifying. And similarly, when I'm moving the slider down, then the colors are just disappearing. So the saturation slider here will increase or decrease the overall hue of your clip. So guys, these are all the controls in the basic corrections tab. Now let's look at the next one. Now the next tab we have under the Lumetri Colour Panel is the Creative tab. This one is primarily used if you want to apply a LUT, and as I mentioned earlier, that a LUT or a lookup table is basically a certain look that has already been pre-designed. Now LUTs can obviously definitely save you a lot of time, as I said before, and if you know the kind of emotion you want to add or a certain kind of look that you want to give to your footage, then you can simply apply a ready-made LUT. You will, however, need to make slight adjustments, but it will definitely save you time that you would have to otherwise spend in correcting and grading your clip. Now there are some built-in LUTs already in there. If you go in this drop down, and once you have selected a LUT, you can then just apply it, and you also have the ability to adjust the intensity of it by using the slider. So if I move my slider towards the right, so it's just basically increasing the intensity of my LUT, as you could see in the clip, and if I just move it towards the left, it's basically decreasing the intensity of it. So at this point it's just 0 now, so there's basically nothing applied on my clip. And if I start moving it towards my right, I'm basically intensifying it. So pretty straightforward. Now the first slider we have is the faded film under the adjustments, and this is again pretty self-explanatory, as it will give a faded look to your clip. The second one is sharpness. So if your footage is too soft or too sharp, you can adjust this one using the slider here. So if I move the slider to the very top, look how crispy the image has become. And if I do the opposite now, you can see how soft my clip has become. And now the next one we have is the Vibrance, and this is definitely one of my favorite ones because it works very differently. Now what it does is that it only increases the saturation of less saturated part of your footage. Now let me explain. So if I use this saturation slider over here, it will boost the overall saturation of my clip. Whereas if I use the Vibrance effect over here, it will only boost saturation for the less saturated parts without affecting the already saturated items. Let me just do it once again, kind of show you how it works. So let me just increase the saturation once, and now you can see that our image looks too saturated. It's overly saturated. And now I'm going to go back to 100. And now let me increase the Vibrance, and now you can see that, definitely it looks overly saturated, but if you notice it, it only increased the saturation of our less saturated parts. So that's how you can use this Vibrance effect. And then we have these two color wheels, which can be used to adjust the highlights and the shadows. If you think you have too much blue or green, you can use these two color wheels. And finally, we have this tint balance slider, which again works very similarly to the one that we looked at in the basic corrections tab. So guys, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't really use these very often. The only times I ever use these sliders or color wheels is when I'm applying a LUT, and even then I prefer using the curves, which we will cover in the next video, in the next tutorial. But really, it's your choice. If you find these ones easier, effective, then go for it. So yeah, I mean, that's really up to you. Now guys, that's really it for now. I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions, anything you want to ask, feel free to drop that in the comment section and I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. I'm not going to see you in the next video. So till then, you take care of yourself.